All right. Well, why don't we start with this? So, where did you first hear about the redemption theory?
The redemption theory? I heard it when I was about 14 years old. That was about, I'm 33 now. That was quite some time ago.
Okay. All right. And so, you've been doing research on this for a very long time then.
You know, I'd like to say I've been doing research on this for a very long time. I got into it and I was a stupid teenager and I just bought into what people told me.
Okay. All right.
And somewhere around my 20s, I thought it was just a joke and went away from it and then came back into it in my early 30s.
I see. All right. And at that point, you've got a lot of information, I understand, about this specific redemption theory, which, by the way, does include the whole TDA, A4V, secured party creditor. It encompasses all of that, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So why don't you just go ahead and take the lead here and let us know what you have found out and how you have gone about finding those things out and whether or not there's any legitimacy to any of it, that sort of thing.
The only legitimacy you're ever going to find in any of this is if things sound too good to be true, and they are.
Mm-hmm.
There's some sort of truth in the fiction, but it's always something that's manipulated to look like there's more evidence than there actually is.
Okay. All right. As I understand that now, did you have a specific thing that you would call yourself? I understand that sovereign citizen is something that upsets a lot of people when it comes up, but just by taking a look at what the media and everything calls it, that kind of encompasses everybody together that has this sort of fringe belief of the redemption theory, fringe belief of traveling versus driving and all these other things. What are you comfortable with being called in terms of what you formally were, or what your ideology was, rather?
We could treat me like a snowflake, but I'm not one of those kind of kids. I don't need special terms. I definitely fell into categorize someone as a sovereign citizen then too.
Okay. All right. So how long were you within the sovereign citizen movement?
Probably 3 years.
Okay. And that was the more recent 3 years than when you were 15 that you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And so I understand that you had somebody that kind of helped to push this ideology on you in terms of the redemption theory more recently that you were explaining to me. Do you want to go into some detail about that?
Sure, I can give it my best shot there.
Okay.
So I had, let's call it, I excelled to the top of the groups as I actually did research, and I would come back with, you guys are wrong on this, you guys are wrong on that, and they'd come back with, oh, well, you didn't do blah, 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 you got to try X, Y, Z. Okay? And I just bought into it until it just became so over the top and outlandish that even someone who has that mindset starts to say, what the hell is really going on here?
Right. So my concern here for people, I think, is that not everybody is so apt to do the research that you did. You're clearly, critical thinking is definitely there for you, and you are for sure going to take a look at something before you jump head first into it if it's going to affect you negatively in any way, or have the potential for that. I think there's a lot of other folks that don't necessarily have that drive to do their own research. What would you say the biggest concerns are in terms of that from standing from where you've been to where you are now?
So your question, I'd like to answer in kind of a roundabout way.
Okay.
If you go and listen to, let's say, April's videos, she's warning you very adamantly to go do the research on these things before you ever listen to what she does. She's telling you all these little hints that if you were to listen carefully, she's telling you, don't do any of this shit, you fucking retards. I'm sorry, you have to meet me.
That's okay. No problem. It's all right. It's okay.
She's literally telling her segment of fans, don't do this. you're going to go to prison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's even a disclaimer on her actual website that states that you need to, talk to an attorney first, yet then adamantly she will make statements saying, you don't trust attorneys. So it's very interesting.
Yes, and that was one of those eye-opening moments for me as well. I had a situation with some family issues that doing some of these things caused me to be out of the picture for a while, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And my guy's personal take was, you got to go get an attorney. Wait, you always tell me we don't trust attorneys. What the hell's going on there?
Right. Right. Yeah, that would definitely throw up some red flags for me, I think, too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, did you finish what you wanted to say on that subject? I didn't want to overlap.
I believe I did.
Oh, all right. So, now I know that there are specific reasons why you have concerns with regards to outside of just the fact that this is something that could get people into a lot of trouble. So do you want to go ahead and just go into what those concerns are? I think what we had discussed before that you had informed me of was that this is somewhat like almost created sort of like a pyramid scheme or maybe a Ponzi scheme. Did I get that right?
To some extent, you're correct. I mean, it's any given kind of cult, you're going to find the same extrapolated out organization where there's somebody at the top, they're bringing in all the people, everybody's underneath them, and you don't fight them, you don't debate them, or you're out of the group.
Okay. I see.
Usually there's someone pulling their strings behind the curtain that no one's ever going to see, that once something gets triggered, they're all out, they're all gone, and then a couple years later, they pop back up. But in the meantime, you got this circle of people that are doing the same thing under different names, and it just repeats consistently.
Okay, so the outbreak that we have seen in terms of this theory specifically, since we're kind of taking this stage by stage, that is all over social media, all over YouTube, all over Facebook. This is just one cycle of this then.
That is correct.
And which would explain to me why we can go 40 years back and we can see Roger Elbick talking about these things.
Yeah.
Because it seems to go in cycles.
Exactly. And then you'll see the next group a little bit more say dangerous than the next.
Okay, explain what you mean by dangerous.
You'd have to look into the Montana Freemen to fully have a grasp of that, but they were a group of sovereign citizens that the FBI eventually infiltrated. They were working out some sort of warrant scams so they could write checks to the Treasury.
Wow.
But they couldn't get banks to cash them.
So
the FBI managed to infiltrate and take them down, but it was a very dangerous process that they went through to get to those people.
So kind of like you're talking about site dress, right?
These were actually warrants. These were Treasury warrants.
Treasury warrants. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Site draft would be similar in idea, but these would be issued from the Treasury.
Okay. So give me an idea of what your thought process is on why any of this made sense to begin with, because there's some factions of truth mixed in with it that make it sound more logical than it really is from the get-go.
Because you see all these things going on around you, and you hear all these things that are going on in the world, and you start believing that which consumes.
Right.
They get you to buy into your hatred. They get you to buy into corruption. They get you to buy into everything in the world is wrong except for looking into what it is that you do.
So you're thinking that, I mean, one of the things I noticed that people really seem to buy into a lot is this secured party creditor idea, because they know that there is such a thing as a UCC1 that's used by lending institutes. They know that there is such a thing as a secured creditor, so therefore they are less likely to question the legalities of being one of those.
Yeah, and having studied it, I can actually tell you a situation in which someone who was facing foreclosure would actually be able to use that in their advantage. They're still going to lose that property. There is no ending that. They've already agreed to the terms and conditions of that loan.
Right. Okay, maybe that would be helpful. Let's get into that. Is that something that you feel like you can describe fairly quickly, or?
That is probably best for a better call. And I'll probably make an individual video on that myself.
Okay. All right. Okay. So tell me what you feel about, let's just start base one. So this time around, we had the onset of videos that started with Harvey Dent's video of the TDA accounts that supposedly you could attach your, your social security, back of your social security card number with the Federal Reserve bank account routing number. Let's start from there. So what was your opinion when you started seeing this pop up? Know what you know now.
I knew it was fake the first second I saw it because I had done it before they'd ever announced it in a different way. And I knew immediately what I had done wrong after it worked.
Okay. So your opinion of, for example, the conspiracy that Harvey continues to talk about is that the accounts are not with the Treasury. The accounts are actually with the Federal Reserve, which I know for a fact that that's not the case because of all the research I've done. But you tell me what your opinion of that conspiracy that Harvey talks about.
First of all, let's talk about something that's a little deeper: securitization. Do you have any idea what happens when you go and you take $1 and you deposit it into a bank?
Well, let's make sure. You go ahead and say.
For every $1 that you deposit into a bank, it has to be securitized. The bank has to take your $1 and invest it into a government security.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's it. There's nothing to it. Your physical dollar, the M1 money supply, is no longer there. It is transferred into the M2 supply.
Okay.
There's this bullshit about derivatives, and they go make 35 times as much money off of your $1, but that doesn't happen. That's not how loans work.
Right. Yeah.
And when that loan is repaid, the credit is discharged.
Right. As a matter of fact, April talks a great deal about, going into the back room when you get a mortgage and them, paying out the mortgage 2 or 3 times to the bank, which is not a possibility because there would be no check and balance at the end of all of that.
And I'll say people do pay an exorbitant amount of interest, but they agree to it up front.
Correct. Yes. Okay. So then let's go a little bit further and talk about some of these groups that are actually doing the quote-unquote monetization of your birth certificate.
There is a gentleman who is now deceased. His name was Patrick Devine.
Okay.
There is a guy who was behind the scenes for him named Tom Whittler out of Ohio. All one has to do is look into Tom Whittler and a guy named Maven to notice that they've been trying to do that scam for the last 30 years, and it's never worked once.
Right.
They would have a copy of your birth certificate and your social security number so they can do some fraud on you.
Right. The identity theft was the first thing that popped into my head the minute I started seeing those things. Is that a part of the actual movement in terms of the redemption theory? Is it something that's going on that you are aware of, the identity theft issue, or is that just a side business for maybe 1 or 2 scammers out there?
If you were a thief and people openly gave you something that you knew you could go use to get whatever you wanted out of it before their credit was defunct, what would you do with it?
Right. That's my exact point there. I think the thing that I was actually questioning was whether or not that was an instruction that's provided along with the pyramid scheme that's going on. Is that something that is also a plus for them?
When there was a guy on YouTube, I was looking into some of his bullshit, and I don't remember his name. It was something about forensic auditing. And his recommendation was to send your Social Security card and your birth certificate to whoever he was advocating saying paperwork to. And he was going on about getting out of a 9-to-5 type workload. But then I looked into his background, and he's working at a bar as a cook.
Yes. I know exactly who you're talking about now that you said that, because I actually checked him out also. Yeah, and yes, that would be someone I would be highly concerned about sending personal information into. So, okay, so I understand that you were one that actually was approached in terms of working on this with the sovereign citizen movement. Is that correct?
Multiple times.
Okay. Do you want to tell everybody about what and how they groomed you? I understand that took a long time.
It took about 2 years trying to get me to fully submit or subscribe to the program.
Okay.
But at the same time, I was doing recon on them to see what they would do and how they did it. And when push comes to shove, it's all explained by looking into what conmen do. There's nothing that doesn't come from the book, and I think you know what book I'm talking about,
yes.
But let's just call it the Book of Con Artists and How to Get Away with It.
Right.
There's a very skilled set of tactics that come through the nuanced training that they give that I have actually perfected at this point, and it's interesting. All you got to really do is go talk to a car salesman, and you'll have about 35% of the gist of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there's ways to use that book that we're talking about, which, you know, we'll kind of get into at another time. There's ways to use it for honest business, and there's ways to use it very negatively, and unfortunately it's I think it's used a lot by con artists. I think it's something they must pass around at tea or something.
Well, I will tell you, I have gotten out of some encounters with police simply by quoting material out of that book. And I'm not saying repercussions for that, but at that time, they didn't know what the hell to do, so they just said, okay, get the fuck out of here.
I see. Okay. So give me kind of an idea in terms of where you would have been at on the pyramid had you decided to go this direction.
I wish I knew.
Ah.
Well, part of me wishes I knew, part of me wishes I don't, because it's hard to say just how many more there were up the chain. In what I would conceive of it being, I would say there would maybe be 2 people on the totem pole ahead.
Wow. They saw something really good in you.
Useful, I would say. I don't know good, per se.
Well, you know what I mean. Yeah, I think that they must have seen something very valuable in your character in order to, you know, for them, that you would have been able to get through to other people maybe.
Well, when they tell me that there's some secret in the blah, 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 Federal Reserve, this and that, and they say, well, to know it, you got to read the UCC, and I come back, I thought the UCC, and it doesn't work because of this article, and this article. Okay, well, that's great, because now you got to go read the Federal Reserve regulations A, B, and C, and we'll talk about double D and Z, and I come back with everything and be like, this is why you're full of shit, and I just keep hashing it over and over again until I'm like, I'm fucking sick of this, no more.
So you weren't falling for the pseudo-law or skewed law type of talk, and at some point you finally came out the other end realizing that there's nothing legitimate whatsoever. Is that correct?
That is correct. And after you sit down and you read all their source material, but they say this is the way it is, this is the law, and then you see, okay, well, it's this book from the 1800s, and that's great and all, but it's really just saying the same thing that the current law says in a slightly different way.
You know, you say source material. So the bottom line here is there is source material that is provided to you as someone who is going to partake in this scam, correct?
Pretty much. Yeah. Very, very specific version numbers of old dictionaries. Like the Webster's 1828, they have a big hard-on for. The Barron's Legal Dictionary, there's some, I'll have to go look through my notes, but there's very precise year numbers of books that they hop onto for some reason.
I know that one of the big ones is Black's Law Dictionary, and they specifically like a certain version of that, too.
Fifth, because it had something to do with 1933, but the whole argument for 1933 doesn't make sense when you realize that the United States had fiat money even before the Civil War.
Right. Right. Yeah. So do you...
If you're going to pick an argument, make sure it holds up historically, because it doesn't when you say the whole reason of this is they took the gold in 33 and then we had fake money after that. Well, we had fake money before that. No, the concept of money is fake to begin with. It's simply a medium of exchange. Right,
right. Yeah, I mean, you know, the facts never seem to hold up. That was the reason why when I started researching it, you know, I made the comments on my videos about the facts matter, simply because the facts never seem to hold up all the way through the argument. So you're absolutely 100% right about that, and I've of course noticed that myself. What do you feel like the end game here is? Because I know when I look at a lot of the there's a lot of groups. I mean, there's over 900 groups at this point that are pushing this. Everyone from the, you know, Oath Keepers all the way to, oh my gosh, the white nationalists and the, you know, Montana Freemen, the Freemen on the land. There's just a ton of groups that are actually pushing this. What is the end game here in your opinion?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to sidestep that for a moment and just say that when the most interesting thing on YouTube right now is an African gentleman named Jesse Peterson, who advocates that rape never truly existed and has clan members coming onto his call to agree with him and thank him, and they found a way to unite, that I don't really think this whole sovereign citizen thing is going to work out long term.
Oh.
You know, people are eventually going to get the message that it's just another form of hatred.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, sadly enough, a lot of the research that I did over the weekend is, you know, going back through the roots of all of this, and everyone that advocates it, unfortunately, it's coming from a very, very racially charged, negatively racially charged area in every instance that I was able to find.
Mm-hmm. What better way to subdue your enemy than to get people to hate them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever it may be.
You know, I think there's already a big push in terms of people being very angry with the government for the faux pas, we'll say, that they have made and continue to make. But unfortunately, you know, what I can see, and you tell me if you agree with this, is a constant pattern of, you know, these are things you can do to get out of debt, and then it doesn't work for you, and then you get told that you're not doing it right, and then when you go back all the way through it again and you end up getting in trouble, ultimately that forms more hatred towards the government.
Yes, because clearly you did something wrong, not the guru who told you to do it.
Of course.
And if you did it right, you wouldn't be in this situation.
Right. But I mean,
well, unfortunately, doing it right meant getting and staying with a job and paying off that debt that you agreed to pay.
Correct. And that's another place that, you know, we don't need to go too far with this, but it boggles my mind from a personal standpoint why people would think that they can agree to specific terms and then somehow twist those terms just because they've decided that they don't want to hold up their end of the bargain. You know, bottom line is you agreed to those terms to begin with. So, you know, it's a very compelling argument that they have, though, I have to say, with just basically it all kind of starts with this whole birth certificate monetized lie. And then they, you know, proceed to, excuse my French, piss you off further with all of this supposed debt fraud and everything. Go ahead.
When I went and I read through the state statutes regarding the birth certificate, and then I went back and I read through the administrative for it, you see very precisely that that certificate is their document. That is not your document, and that's because they have to control the form to make sure there's no fraud going on with it.
Right, the security, right.
But, you know, by signing something and giving it to someone else, you are, in effect, creating a trust with them. It creates a franchise, but that is how you are able to enact your rights as a citizen. Right. How else do you expect to have rights as a citizen if not for some sort of formal documentation that says you agree to participate under that franchise? You know, whatever your thoughts on corporate government are, it doesn't matter because we act as a corporation in general. That is how it works. We have to either agree or disagree, and that's part of the whole reason we have governments to begin with.
Well, and I've said many times in my videos and in my comments, for example, the whole argument with regards to the United States being a corporation. Yes, they act like a corporation. Doesn't mean that they're under article of being corporation. But yes, they do act like a corporation, and you find that if you don't run a county, a city, a state like a business, you're not going to be successful. There has to be check and balance. There has to be.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason part of the reason of that is because the whole mission of government is to preserve property.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how else to do it if not for some sort of administrative rule through voting and bureaucracy?
Right. Right, exactly. So, interestingly enough, let me just bring this up with you quickly, and then we'll wrap this up if you don't have anything else you want to add to it. Bringing in some of the information that's out there with these bogus arrest warrants and stuff like that we've seen very recently from some of these groups. What I'm finding is that they make really strong claims that, the parties within government, parties that are promoting anything other than the scam, basically. So, for example, my channel, because we do expose scams and try to warn people, they get very angry with my channel and will do things like call me a communist or call me a Marxist or whatever. And what's funny to me is when you read through their documentation, like their arrest warrants and all this other bogus stuff that they put out, in reality, that is actually a form of communism because they're not giving you, for example, the arrest warrant that I brought up on my channel a week ago or so, stated that basically they would provide due process, but didn't matter whether I was there or not. It didn't matter whether, or not, it was, if you don't respond to us in 90 days, you're automatically guilty. These type of things, which to me kind of, that doesn't scream anything that you would find in a democracy type of setting. You see what I?
Yes.
So hypocritical, I think, would be the word. That what we see.
Maybe, but I also heard that you were some sort of YouTube murderer. So there's that.
Exactly. Yes. Right. Exactly. It's attempted murder. So let's get that straight. It's attempted murder.
Oh, okay.
My reason for being an attempted murderer is that I read an article, and within that article, it called a gentleman a sovereign citizen, and by me making the statement of sovereign citizen, that supposedly put a target on that gentleman's back for law enforcement to go and shoot basically without question. So that's what the attempted murder charge was.
Does that mean that I am a murderer?
Are you?
That makes me wonder, did I just murder myself when we started this call?
I'm thinking that you may have, or it could be conspiracy to commit murder. I'm not sure. But if you really want to break it down, people are looking for, or the people that they gather, rather, are looking for freedom. They're looking for a lack of hate. They're looking for kind of the love and light type of stuff that they talk about. And in reality, what's happening on the inside of these groups is the absolute 100% opposite from what I can tell.
If these people really want to know what's going on in the world, all they got to do is find out when their local county board of governors meets and go sit in and listen.
Yeah.
And hear how they work and see how it happens, because you're going to find that there's a very specific set of rules for procedure within the local county that you're going to find in the courts, that you're going to find in the state courts, that you're going to find in the Supreme Court, that you're going to find out through the United States and the world.
Thinking maybe one of the best things to do is to actually start bringing people together. Maybe you and I can work on this together, and some of the other channels who are trying to assist people to help people understand how to actually legally go about changing things that will work.
That is very important. I've been advocating for a group of people that I talked to out of Europe that there's this weird internet killing bill that's going to Parliament now, and I've been addressing and saying, you want something to change, you have to get with your residents and tell them what you think and feel about this.
So what would you have to say to those people that have fallen for the conspiracy? Like, for example, this is another one that Mr. Dent talks about a lot, and that is that your vote, your opinions, your vote just doesn't matter. So you're crazy to think that anything would ever change.
I would say, how's that working out for you so far?
Right. Yeah, that's my opinion too. I think they really got some blinders on through just sheer anger. And to be perfectly honest, there are times that I think people appreciate being angry because it gives them a form of feeling of power that they have lost somewhere along the line. And sadly, going off of anger and hate is just simply not going to get you or any of us where we need to be.
When you subscribe to anger and hatred, you are under control of someone else.
Absolutely.
And you have to ask yourself, why do I have these feelings? Who are they benefiting? Because they're not benefiting you, and you're going to cause yourself more harm.
Right. Well, Gavin, we're going to go into more detail in another video here very short, probably sometime next week, right?
Yes.
Okay, and so we'll go ahead and cut this off here.